Hello, welcome to our next lesson on Nozick. And Nozick's political philosophy here is known as libertarianism. He's one of the philosophical founders of libertarianism. And what this political philosophy generally says is that people have a greater degree of liberty to do as they please with as little coercion from others and the government as possible. So there's a heavy emphasis on liberty, hence in the word libertarianism, to do as you please, as long as we're going to see, as long as you're not harming other people. So as long as you aren't interfering with others' liberties, then you're free to do as you please. Individual liberty carries the greatest weight in deliberation. For example, no banning of drugs. If someone wants to do drugs and be a drug addict and be a zombie for their life, maybe OD and die, well, that's their liberty. That's their freedom to do what they want to do. No military draft. You cannot force someone to go to war for the country. You cannot interfere with their liberty. So the idea behind this is that there needs to be small government not interfering with our lives. No big brother telling us what to do in life. So some things you can think about here, though, as far as no banning of drugs and having no draft. Can you think of examples, though, where these actually would interfere with other people's lives and interfere with other people's liberties, for example? Well, one situation would be if someone does drugs and they have the freedom to do such drugs, and then they, in their drug induced high, they harm someone, maybe while behind the wheel of a car or just walking around, they harm people. So that could interfere with other people's rights and their liberties, such as the right to life. Also, having no draft, well, what if there's another country invading our country and we don't have enough people to man the shores to try and stop the invasion? Well, if we don't have a draft in this case, and people don't go and they have the liberty to not go, well, this is going to interfere with everyone else's lives in the country, right? And puts their life in jeopardy. Perhaps maybe the invading people might kill us all or make us into slaves or what have you. Okay, so how Nozick justifies his position, this libertarian view, is from the state of nature thought experiment. And the state of nature thought experiment has a long history in political philosophy. And what the state of nature attempts to do is, well, essentially it is a social contract theory. So you can think of Nozick's justification for libertarianism as, like Rawls, is also a social contract theory justification, where you imagine in a hypothetical situation that people come together to construct their laws. And there are certain rational constraints that have to be abided by, though. And as we're going to see, the rational constraints that Nozick puts in place are in regards to thinking about the state of nature and trying to escape the state of nature. So what the state of nature is you can think of it as an imaginary time where it's each person for themselves. It's each person on their own. It's every man and woman for themselves. Right? So there is no police force, no army, no government. And in this situation, as it's commonly described by the philosopher Hobbes, he says that life would be poor, nasty, brutish, and short. You'd always be looking out over your back. People can do whatever they want to your body. They can kill you, etc. And you would always be worried that people would be taking your food and what have you. So this would not be a healthy world to live in. It would cause tremendous amounts of stress, and most likely you would not live for very long. And in this kind of state of nature, there's no time for art to make beautiful things, no time for business or industry or for scientific inventions to enhance our lives, because you're just too busy looking out behind your back, right? That someone might be killing you, because there's no order, there's no justice, there's no laws, there's no police. So the idea here is that any rational person would want to escape the state of nature, right? Any rational person would want to live long. And so in order to live long, you need to escape the state of nature. So therefore, we need to create principles of justice that allows us to escape the state of nature. And insofar as these principles of justice allow us to escape the state of nature, they are rationally justified. So you can imagine us creating a social contract of people getting together in the state of nature, wanting to escape the state of nature. Well, based on these rational constraints that people are getting together in order to escape the state of nature, what kinds of principles of justice would people agree upon? What kind of contract would they form and sign off on? Well, from the state of nature thought experiment, government should be minimal and only a night watchman state that protects citizens from force, theft, and fraud. So in this situation, what Nozick says is that we would form a government in order to escape the state of nature, where it would be a small government, very minimal, and that would protect its citizens from basic things such as force, theft, fraud, rape, etc. So what we would have are things like a police force. We would have things like an army, maybe, and so these kinds of things are the only things that we would have in our government. And we don't need anything else to escape the state of nature. We don't need a welfare state, for example, to escape the state of nature. Therefore, we should have no welfare state. Nozick says that we are not morally obliged to do anything positive for anyone else, and vice versa. Other people do not have a moral obligation to help us in our time of need, let's say, or if we need help. There's no welfare state for the poor, no help for the handicapped. If you're born mentally handicapped or physically handicapped, you'll get no government assistance, even if you're born into a poor family that cannot help you. No help for natural disaster victims. There's no moral obligation. The demands of justice, the demands of morality do not extend beyond having to pay taxes to have a night watchman state. That's the only moral obligation you have, is to pay your taxes in order for a night watchman state. But you do not have an obligation to pay more taxes to support other things, like helping fellow countrymen and women who have suffered from natural disasters. So what Nozick kind of notoriously says is that government taking tax dollars for the above is a kind of slavery. So the government taking any more money for other additional stuff beyond a night watchman state is a kind of slavery, because you're working hard, you're doing the work yourself, and you're earning the money from your own labor. Well, decent chunk of that money that you've earned, that you've worked for, is being automatically taken by the government in the form of taxes. And if some of that is used for stuff beyond a night watchman state, that's not necessary. That goes beyond the principles of justice that would come out of the state of nature. So therefore, in a way, it's a kind of slavery, because you're working and part of your pay is being taken out against your will. To pay for things that are unnecessary, that are not morally obligatory. So Nozick endorses part of libertarianism is this idea of entitlement theory. And what this entitlement theory is that as long as one has acquired property without violating others' rights, then one is entitled to do what one wishes with one's property. So there's a heavy emphasis here on doing the work and earning something, right? Working hard, doing the work, you've earned it. Well, if you've earned money or property or land or what have you through your own efforts, and you haven't violated other people's rights, right? You're doing honest work, then you are entitled to the fruits of your labor, and that's yours, and no one else can take that away from you, except the government can take away tax dollars in order to support a night watchman state. Once again, that would be justified for them to do, because that allows you to escape the state of nature. And this entitlement theory has its roots in the likes of John Locke. John Locke was a political philosopher. One of his famous books, The Second Treatise of Government, was the philosophical foundations for the political ideas and philosophies that underwrite our political democracy that we have. So the ideas from the likes of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, they got their ideas from John Locke. So what Locke says is that if one mixes labor with the natural world, then one owns the product. So this is his theory of property rights, and it is still the dominant view in political philosophy as well as in law about property ownership. If you work for it, you put in the labor with the natural world, such as farming land or inventing some new machine or what have you, then you own the product of your labor, and people cannot take that away from you. So what follows from entitlement theory is not only that you should not be forced to support a welfare state or helping the homeless or helping those who are born with disabilities or who have suffered from natural disasters, but also there's no inheritance tax because one owns one's money and can do what one wishes with it. So we do have an inheritance tax, and Nozick argues against that, saying there should be no inheritance tax because let's say it's your parents and they want to leave you money after their death. Well, they earn that money, and so long as they did it honestly without harming other people, they're not part of the mafia or something like that, and they've earned their money lawfully, well, then they can do whatever they want with their money. If they want to give every penny to you upon their death, then that's perfectly within their right to do something like that because they earn that money, and the government cannot come in and take away inheritance tax from your inheritance. Another argument that Nozick uses is this thought experiment called the Wilt Chamberlain thought experiment. And if you're not familiar with who Wilt Chamberlain is, he used to play basketball professionally in the NBA. And he was very tall, and he was the best during his era. In one game, he scored 100 points, which no one has replicated in professional basketball in the NBA. So let's imagine this scenario. Let's say Wilt Chamberlain signs a contract where $5 from every ticket for his games is given to him and dropped off in his Wilt Chamberlain box. So he gets his normal salary. Other NBA basketball players get their normal salary, but he signs a contract saying every ticket for my games must have an extra $5 attached to it, and that extra $5 cost to the viewers of the game will go into my box, and that's extra money that's given to me. Is that okay for Wilt Chamberlain to have this kind of unequal distribution in income as compared to other basketball players? And Nozick says yes, that Wilt owns this extra money, and an unequal distribution is fine given Wilt's work and the fans' decision to transfer the money. The fans are not forced to pay the extra $5. They fully willingly pay the $5 extra. Of course, I'll pay $5 extra to see Wilt Chamberlain play basketball. And Wilt owns this money. Wilt put in the extra time and effort to become such a great basketball player. So he has earned the ability to make $5 extra from every ticket from this contract. So he has earned it. That's why this is justified. Now, what might Rawls say about this? Right? Rawls would say in this situation that an unjust or an unequal distribution is allowed in this case, and that's because it's to the benefit of the least off NBA basketball players. These kinds of financial incentives will help motivate basketball players to become even better. And this allows for people like Wilt Chamberlain, all-stars within the league, and this attracts more people to watch games, right? People want to see Wilt Chamberlain play or other great basketball players play, and they're fully willing to pay the extra money. It's more exciting. And so this helps keep the league relevant as well as still alive. right? And perhaps without this extra incentive, that would increase the likelihood that the NBA basketball league would flounder and would go under, because there just aren't incentives to become extra great, and the league becomes boring, and then maybe basketball only becomes as popular as, who knows, maybe bowling today or something like that. It's just not very popular anymore, and the least off, the basketball players who are not the best, who are kind of on the bench, they wouldn't be making as much money, or maybe if the league collapses, they are out of a job. So it would be to the advantage of the least off basketball players for having differences in pay. Okay, another element of Nozick's view here is espousing or endorsing a laissez-faire capitalism. You can think of this as being a hands-off or free capitalism with no government intervention. The government should not interfere with the market even to make it better, and there should be laissez-faire capitalism. For example, there should be no Federal Reserve lowering interest rates to try to stimulate the economy when we're in a recession. In the 2008 financial collapse, no government intervention to try to resuscitate the economy or to save, let's say, the American car industry, right, to bail them out. During the Great Depression, no Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, which was a government intervention plan which helped us get out of the Great Depression. So these are actually seen as very severe counterexamples to laissez-faire capitalism, that we need to have government intervention in these kinds of cases. So one reason why Nozick espouses a laissez-faire capitalism is that a free market tends to reward individual effort, skill, and performance. So without government intervention, there is nothing hindering you from putting in your own effort, your own hard work to try to make it. And whether you make it or not, you have a successful business or not, well, that's on you, right? So it really can reward individual effort, skill, and performance, in that there is no government intervention that might hinder you from attaining such rewards. Also, what's noted here is that free capitalism is necessary for people to exercise their fundamental rights, like their right to be able to pursue their own dreams and goals without government intervention or some kind of interference that might restrict in some way one's pursuit of one's, let's say, career goals or business goals or what have you. There are as we've gone over some objections against laissez-faire capitalism, there are other objections that I won't go much further into detail against laissez-faire capitalism. So this is largely a discredited economic theory. It has its roots in the philosopher Adam Smith. If you take an introduction to economics class, you'll learn a variety of other objections against laissez-faire capitalism, such as there being externalities and pollution, for example. So in the Industrial Revolution, there were a lot of factories creating pollution, polluting people's drinking water, polluting people's air, decreasing people's lifespan and health. We need to have some kind of government intervention to stop companies from polluting our drinking water and our air, etc., given factory production. Okay, so let's look at some other objections. One objection is in regards to the laissez-faire capitalism element. Free markets can lead to violations of a right to life. One example is the Irish potato famine of the 1840s. This in human history has the highest recorded death rate out of any famine. What's interesting about this situation, though, is that there was actually a good amount of food being produced in Ireland. It's just that the English could pay a higher price than Irish people for the food. So Irish farmers were shipping their food out to England, to the English. And that's a significant part of the reason why there was such a lack of food and people were dying of starvation in record numbers in Ireland. And what should have happened in this case is that the Irish government should have intervened into the market and disallowed Irish farmers from having their products leave the shores in this kind of situation. And in U.S. history, we have had similar situations that are somewhat analogous in that, for example, in the oil shortages in the 70s, we've had regulations that, for example, crude oil produced in the U.S. could not leave U.S. shores. Okay, a second objection is that no one does anything alone but together as a community. So this is known as the communitarian critique of libertarianism. No one does anything alone but together as a community. The self is communitarian, not individual. This leads to greater obligations to others in our family and our community. So the idea here is that no one does anything alone, but it's kind of as a community or as relying on other people, we in part that helps us achieve our career goals. So a significant part of the story is putting in individual effort, but also a significant part of the story is other people having an impact on our lives in a positive way that has helped shape us and helped lead us towards being successful. Um, for example, we've all had teachers, right, who have taught us how to read, who have taught us maybe manners and things that we shouldn't do that have helped shape us to become successful members of society. We've had family members also impact and shape our personalities, family and friends, and who have taught us and educated us in various ways to be functioning members of society. We also have, for example, farmers who have helped create food for us to survive, and carpenters who have built houses for us to have shelter, who have done things that are responsible for our very existence and for our very life. There are people who are working in, for example, in the plumbing water industry, where we can just turn on a faucet and there's life-sustaining water coming out of a faucet, which is really remarkable when you think about the wide expanse of human history. And so what has helped us in our very existence, as well as in helping shape us become who we are, and have in part helped us with our success, are other people and the community. So the idea here is we don't do anything completely alone, but a significant part of the story is other people having helped us reach our goals. So in other words, who we are is not an individual self or an atom that's separated from other cells, but rather we're part of a community. And so insofar as other people have in part helped us become who we are and have helped us in part with our successes, we owe a debt of gratitude and we have an obligation to other members in our community. So there's this phrase, giving back to the community, and there's this and this is part of this general communitarian idea. So for example, Wilt Chamberlain had coaches, right, that helped him become such a great basketball player. He had teachers who educated him in how to read, which is required to function in modern day society. He's had family and friends who have helped shape his personality, maybe helped make him have drive in life, etc. And so the idea here is he didn't do it by himself, completely by himself, although a significant part of the story is that he did the effort. But another part of the story is that other people have been behind him, have helped him. And so he has an obligation to give back to the community. He has to give back more than just having a night watchman state, but giving back in the sense that he needs to help support, let's say, a welfare state. Or other people who might be needy within society. So there is a moral obligation to help others in our community. Okay, so that's it for this lesson, and I will see you